from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Sally Burdett. Our top stories this hour. It's Super Sunday in Europe. Millions of people across 21 countries go to the polls in the final day of voting in the EU parliamentary elections. The EU's top diplomat condemns what he's calling a massacre of civilians in Gaza during Israel's operation to free 4 hostages. In Tel Aviv, police use water cannon against anti-government protesters who are calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Narendra Modi sworn in for a historic 3rd term in office in India, but he'll have to rely on other parties to form a government. And
making waves, UK-Chinese Dragon Boat Festival is held in Salford, Manchester to celebrate cultural diversity.
Polls have been open on Sunday across 21 countries for the final and biggest day of voting for the European Parliament. Among those choosing the 720 MEPs are Europe's 3 big economies, France, Spain and Germany. Despite a series of scandals, Germany's far-right AfD party is expected to make a strong showing against more centrist and left-leaning groups. In France, there's speculation that the National Rally, the far-right anti-immigration party of Marine Le Pen, could top the polls again, as it did in the last 2 EU parliamentary elections, eclipsing President Emmanuel Macron's centrist Renaissance party. And in Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has been calling for a huge turnout, claiming his right and far-right opponents have been pushing a groundless corruption probe against his wife. Those parties have accused Sánchez of offering weak leadership. Let's speak to our correspondent, Will Denzelo, in Brussels. Hello, Will. So polls are closing across the EU shortly. What do we know about turnout so far?
Well, Sally, in about 15 minutes' time, we'll have some national results coming through. But until then, it's up to politicians, analysts and us journalists to continue reading the tea leaves of voter turnout. Back in 2019, we saw a significant drop from other years, down around 50%. The message from EU officials urging people across the 27 members of the European Union to exercise their democratic right to go out and vote. An interesting side fact is that around 26 million people will be voting for the first ever time. Of course, all parties have been really trying to canvass young people to come out and vote. Very interesting to see how that swings demographics and results as the results continue to come through throughout this evening here in Brussels and across Europe. And looking at some turnout polls, some interesting figures. Hungary, at around lunchtime, saw a 10% increase in voter turnout compared to 2019. There are also strong turnouts that we saw in the Netherlands, as well as places like Latvia and Czechia. We saw some disappointing turnouts, though, compared to 2019 in places like Spain and Greece. Very interesting to see whether that will extrapolate when the polls close in those countries.
Of course, this election has been marred by incidents of violence. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sally, that's absolutely right. Of course, just a few days ago, back on Friday, the Danish Prime Minister was pushed. She suffered from whiplash, we understand. It is an attack that Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, described as a despicable act. We also have heard from Charles Michel, the European Council President, who said he was outraged by the incident. This comes just a few weeks after the shooting of the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico that left him in critical condition. There's also been a few high-profile attacks on German politicians too. it's not just physical attacks in isolated examples that have captured headlines in the lead up to these elections. There have also been reports of cyber attacks that were claimed by a Russian hacking group in the Netherlands. We've also seen plenty of incidents of misinformation, with many European officials pointing the finger at Russia. The Kremlin, important to note, have reiterated consistently a denial that they have engaged in election meddling. Of course, we've seen the European Union put in place the AI Act to try and, in part, clamp down on things like deepfakes and misinformation in the lead up to elections, but that piece of legislation wasn't brought through early enough to be fully in place this time around in this election. Sally?
All right, thank you very much. That's Will Denzler coming to us from Brussels. The EU's top diplomat has condemned as a massacre the killing of Palestinians during Israel's military operation to rescue 4 hostages. Joseph Borrell says the bloodbath must end immediately, and he's called for an enduring ceasefire in Gaza. Israel's forces, backed by airstrikes, fought intense gun battles with Hamas around the Nuseirat refugee camp to free the 4 hostages. The 4 are part of an estimated 120 hostages still being held by Hamas militants who attacked Israel in October last year. Saturday's rescue operation saw at least 274 Palestinians killed, according to Gaza's health ministry. In Israel, police use water cannon to disperse anti-government protesters in Tel Aviv. They're calling for an immediate ceasefire and for all the remaining hostages held in Gaza to be released. Many of the protesters are also demanding early elections. So I'll speak to our correspondent Jonathan Regev, who's in Tel Aviv. Hello, Jonathan. So these 4 hostages brought back to Israel on Saturday. Reports, though, from Gaza of many Palestinian lives lost during that operation. What is Israel saying?
There's no denial in Israel that this operation cost, unfortunately, the lives of many Palestinians, many of them uninvolved. But Israel is saying the responsibility for this fact lies completely on Hamas. Not only did they choose, according to Israel, to come into Israel and take those people hostage, and kidnap them and take them to Gaza as hostages, but they keep them in homes or tunnels which are right next to the Nuseirat market, which is a very crowded place, understanding that if Israel dares to go on an operation, then hundreds and hundreds of civilians will be killed. Hamas was well aware of that, and therefore Israel is saying that all the responsibility lies on Hamas. They are the ones who kidnapped these Israelis. They are the ones who kept them in places that are right next to crowded civilian areas. Therefore, all of the responsibility lies on Hamas. And of course, on the Israeli side, very emotional images on Saturday following the release of these 4 hostages. They're all in relatively good condition, but still not 100%. There's still things that have to be taken care of now that they're back to Israel, now that they will be able to get proper medical assistance. And the head of the ward in the Israeli hospital, which the hostages were taken to, initially spoke about what he saw as their condition. Let's listen.
As to the nutritional status of the captives that have come back, all of them are in severe nutritional deficiency with a significantly decreased muscle mass and interruptions to their metabolic status. It is clear, especially the first period of the captivity, that they did not receive adequate nutrition.
So, joy that 4 hostages are back to Israel, but we know more hostages are still being held. And we also know that the pressure within Israel is relentless. Protests for people calling for a ceasefire. Tell us a little bit more about that, because we understand water cannon had to be used as well.
That is correct. Quite violent protests overnight in Tel Aviv, because along with the joy of 4 hostages coming back, there are still 120 hostages still held in Gaza, and there's a very clear understanding that Israel will not be able to bring them all back through military operations. If at least officially, 77 of those are still alive. And even if the number is far smaller than that, we're still speaking of tens of hostages that are still alive, that according to most Israelis will only be brought back through a hostage deal with Hamas, not through a military operation. As happy as this operation was for Israelis, let's remember 7 hostages have been brought back from Gaza alive since the war began. And if you want to bring back whoever remains alive, then most Israelis realize that it will have to come through a deal, and a deal that will cost Israel quite an expensive price. But according to the protesters last night, they're saying this is a price Israel has to pay, because bringing those hostages back is something that is much, much more important. And this led to rather violent clashes overnight in Tel Aviv, people demanding, even with everything that we've seen yesterday, even with all the joy of those 4 hostages being brought back, Israel has to go to a deal to bring everybody else back to Israel.
All right, thank you so much for that update from Tel Aviv, Jonathan Regev. Well, let's get the view now from inside Gaza. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in Khan Yunis. He has more on that Israeli raid on the Nazareth refugee camp.
According to the testimonies of the eyewitnesses and according to the information that we have been seeing, according to the destruction that we have been assessing, and according to also the people who are injured and dead, we have seen it was a catastrophe. It was not an operation. Hundreds of people were killed, and that has been confirmed by Al-Auda Hospital in Gaza Central area and Nusayrat, and by Shuhada Al-Aqsa right behind me. And up to this particular moment, some family members are coming and picking and bringing the bodies of their deer, and also the attempts to retrieve the bodies of the ones who are killed, who are still remaining under the rubble, are still underway. Palestinians have seen the destruction happening in there. According to the eyewitnesses that we spoke to, unmanned drones were gunning down every single person who was in the street. The Israeli occupation forces were targeting An-Nusayrat market. An-Nusayrat market is filled of ordinary people who were shopping and who were shot by the Israeli occupation. They were building a fire belt. That fire belt was meant to destroy anything. It was not meant to destroy combatant, according to the people who were talking. It was meant to destroy every single human being in that area, and the result was 274 Palestinians killed, 274 lives taken, 98 houses and residential spaces targeted by the Israeli occupation. So this is something that is above and beyond any ground operation or pinpoint operation. That is destruction manifested and translated into large action that has taken the life of the people, because the Israeli government has been saying that the collateral damage, because they perceive the Palestinians, according to some of the Palestinian sources, as collateral damage, 274 people were killed. And the bodies are kept in Shuhada Al-Aqsa Hospital, where I am standing now, and in Al-Auda Hospital, where I also saw some of the bodies taken there, and I saw some of the families also taking their deeds to burial. So a catastrophe that took place, large number of Palestinians that were killed, as large as 274, more than 400 Palestinians killed, and more than 98 houses targeted and destroyed, while the Israeli occupations were trying to release and managed to release 4 Israeli captives. So 274 lives of the Gazans in return, or versus 4 lives of Israeli captives who are returning to Israel.
That, of course, was Saturday's action, that hostage release operation. Have there been more strikes today, Akram?
Yes, indeed. There were at least 6 different strikes in 6 different parts of An-Nusayrat refugee camp. According to Al-Auda Hospital, they received so far 6 dead bodies and 22 other people who are injured. Shuhada Al-Aqsa also received around 40 people who were injured during the operations that are taking place in An-Nusayrat. So even after this operation came to an end, that pinpoint operation, the bombardment is still continuous, the death is still continuous, the destruction is still continuous, and the injury is still continuous as well.
Akram Al-Satari in Gaza. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Narendra Modi is sworn in as India's Prime Minister for a third time. We'll be live in New Delhi. Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. It's Super Sunday in Europe. Millions of people across 21 countries go to the polls in the final day of voting in the EU parliamentary elections. The EU's top diplomat condemns what he's calling a massacre of civilians in Gaza during Israel's operation to free 4 hostages. Narendra Modi has been sworn in for a historic third term as India's Prime Minister. It's the first time in a decade that his BJP party has failed to win an outright majority. Modi will have to rely on allies to form a new government. Analysts say the BJP lost votes due to frustration over chronic unemployment and inflation. Our correspondent Ravinder Bauer has the latest from New Delhi.
The party did not get the full majority and they will have to rely on their allies for governance as well as for policy making. So it's going to be a tough one as far as Mr. Narendra Modi and his BJP is concerned. What we have seen today when the meetings regarding portfolios or the cabinet ministers, names of cabinet ministers were being decided this afternoon at Narendra Modi's home, we are seeing the differences that are coming forward. One of the allies has refused to take the Minister of State position. They are demanding a cabinet position, which the BJP has said that they will be providing them in some time. Similarly, another ally needed more cabinet ministries. They were given lesser, and they are also now ready to wait for some time. But how long is the question? Because these parties come with their regional ambitions, and they will make the best of this opportunity. They will flex the muscles, and because of shortage of numbers, Narendra Modi and BJP will have to listen to these demands, how realistic those demands, and how much can they go forward with fulfilling them is some questions, some things that we really have to wait and watch. But definitely regional parties already asking for more funds, already asking for special status, which means providing them federal funds at a simpler term. So these are situations which is already developing on the first day when this team 3 of Narendra Modi is taking an oath.
So Ravinder Bauer in New Delhi. Now, officials on the Greek island of Symi say they have discovered the body of British TV doctor Michael Mosley, ending a 4-day search. The 67-year-old had been missing since Wednesday when he went for a walk along a coastal path in extremely high temperatures. The island's mayor said his body was spotted as rescuers searched a nearby cave complex. It's believed he may have fallen. In a statement, Dr. Mosley's wife said she had been hugely comforted by an outpouring of love from around the world. South Korea is preparing to blast what it's described as unbearable noise across its border with the DPRK in retaliation for waves of rubbish-filled balloons being floated over from the north. Just this weekend, 330 balloons dropped around 15 tons of trash in South Korea. Now, Seoul will restart its broadcasts across the border, a tactic last used in 2018 when K-pop songs and anti-DPRK messages were broadcast towards Pyongyang. US border officials say the number of migrants caught crossing illegally from Mexico has fallen after tough new rules came into force. Most irregular migrants are now temporarily barred from claiming asylum under a new policy introduced by President Joe Biden. Officials say it's too early to tell if the recent drop in numbers is a definitive trend. One of the key issues for voters in the upcoming US presidential election is gun violence. On average, 300 people are killed every day in gun-related incidents. June is Gun Violence Awareness Month in the United States. Many people wear orange to mark it, something that came about following a tragic death in Chicago. CGTN's Dan Williams reports.
Families share a moment to remember loved ones lost to gun violence. Among them is Cleopatra Crowley Pendleton, the mother of Hadia Pendleton, who was shot and killed in Chicago in 2013. Her death came just 1 week after she performed with her high school majorette squad at US President Barack Obama's second inauguration. Following the tragedy, Hadia's friends commemorated her life by wearing orange.
It was borrowed from the theory of hunters, but when they're in the forest, the thing you can see on a cloudy, rainy, whatever kind of day is the bright shade of orange, and so you know not to shoot.
The Wear Orange campaign spread, picked up by organisations nationwide to honour all those impacted by gun violence.
So it's definitely been adopted by a lot of different people internationally, and it's very symbolic of how concerned people are with the issue of gun violence in their communities.
It was here on January the 29th, 2013, where Hadia Pendleton was shot and killed. She was just 15 years old. An honour student, she was standing with her friends after finishing her final school exam. Her killer apparently mistaking her for a rival gang member. This is the 11th annual Party for Peace, organised by Hadia's family. The goal, to create a safe environment for children and families to come together.
So us creating a safe haven every year, annually, for this is like, we can make sure kids can be kids.
Last year, there were nearly 2,500 shootings in Chicago alone. And although that number was lower than the previous 3 years, it still amounts to about one shooting every 3.5 hours.
What we want to see is not just a decrease in gun violence across Illinois, but we want it to end, and it needs to end. And in order to do that, we have to not only pass common sense gun laws that keep our communities safe, but we have to work on the root causes, provide opportunities and resources, equity for black and brown communities.
Hadia's story is also one of hope, and her family is determined to continue to search for solutions to gun violence.
It's grown because so many people can see themselves in this movement. If not firsthand, they've seen other people try to survive having been a part of this, and they want to mitigate the likelihood that it can happen to somebody else.
Hadia's tragic death rocked a family and a community. There have been many more deaths by gun violence since then. But those here are resolved to keep advocating for victims and steering young people away from guns and gang violence. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
Since 2012, the Dragon Boat Race has become an annual fixture in the English city of Salford. This year, the event brought together around 40 amateur teams and a dozen professional ones to enjoy a day of sport and cultural inclusiveness. Our correspondent Lee Jinhua reports.
Attention!
It's a display of skills and teamwork. Salford, in northwest England's Greater Manchester region, again played host to an exhilarating dragon boat race this weekend. The atmosphere was electric as teams battled it out, their paddles slicing through the water with precision and power. This year, Manchester United's foundation has also joined the game, a whole new ball game for these professionals in football.
Well, they're both obviously different techniques, but actually the tactics are very similar in terms of working together, good communication, working as a team. There's so much synergy between any team game. Obviously, this is on the water, normally we're on grass, but apart from that, I think it was a really good team effort.
For most participants, the priority is not to win, but to have fun.
Honestly, I think we did actually pretty well. So as long as we only gonna train like once, last week. So I think everyone has done a great job, and then we're screaming, we're yelling, and we're like having team spirits. That's all we need, right? So yeah, very excited, honestly.
Many here today may not know the Dragon Boat Festival is celebrated every year to commemorate Qu Yuan, a Chinese poet and official over 2,300 years ago. Legend has it Qu Yuan drowned himself in the river of Milor in central China over his banishment by the king back then. Residents who loved him so much racing dragon boats to find his body and threw zongzi, a kind of rice cake wrapped in bamboo leaves, into the river so that fish wouldn't eat his body.
Now in the UK, the event is considered an opportunity to showcase traditional Chinese culture, which has become an integral part of Greater Manchester.
Our Dragon Boat Festival have a slogan, "We get together, we share the future." This is also the reason we come together with the Salford City Council and the British Dragon Boat Race Association. We do it together. It's not a Chinese community event. It's British society, cultural and sport event.
The Dragon Boat Festival also offers a chance for the younger generation, especially those of Chinese descent, to learn about their own culture.
So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today in Salford Quays, in the great city of Salford, for what is the 10th Chinese dragon boat race. And obviously this is really important in the calendar for Greater Manchester and Salford because of the Chinese diaspora who've made Greater Manchester their home, and also the UK's relationship with China.
Manchester is commonly associated with football. Maybe in the future, dragon boat racing could be another of the city's iconic sports. Li Jianhua, CGTN, Salford, Manchester.
A last look at the headlines. Polls are about to close across the EU following millions of people casting their votes in European parliamentary elections. The EU's top diplomat condemns what he's calling a massacre of civilians in Gaza during Israel's operation to free 4 hostages. And Narendra Modi is sworn in for a historic third term in office in India, but he'll have to rely on other parties to form a government. And that's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. We've got more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's Razor. For now, from all of the team in London, goodbye.